Often when you're starting to think about your event, you have something in your mind. Maybe it's a full room, a conference center, or a stadium buzzing with life and activity. And immediately, what typically happens is you go into planning mode to see how you can achieve that goal. But I want to encourage you to go back just a little bit further before we begin the planning phase and ask some more existential questions. So number one, I want to figure out your why. Whether you're having an in-person event or an online event, one of the first things you need to determine is what exactly the metrics of your success are in the event. These metrics are not primarily related to the number of people attending the event, although getting a big crowd may certainly be connected to your metrics. If you're hosting a product or a service launch, your ultimate goal will be related to the sales that are derived from this event. The amount of people who attend the event may therefore be a key indicator of success, but getting the wrong crowd that results in very few sales may lead you to adjust your strategy later on. In this regard, just getting the big crowd might make you feel good in the moment, but it would be more helpful for your team to talk about the real metric of sales and plan towards that particular goal. Now, if your goal is to communicate your vision to your super fans, your radical core audience, having a huge crowd with hundreds of thousands of people may surprisingly actually work against your main metric. If your audience wants to be addressed as if they are the only one that matters, including them just as one of the many thousands of the audience may be a bad idea. So I want you to think deeply about the metric of success, whether it's online or in person, and work with your team to achieve that particular goal. Now, let's translate some of these thoughts to putting on an online event. Now, in the TV industry, getting the eyeballs is a key indicator of success. Large numbers are also attractive to online broadcasters as they can result in advertising revenue. The strategy for engaging your audience online may be the same, simply gathering a big crowd. And if a simple big crowd is the objective, then maybe the right strategy is simply to go out on all the platforms like YouTube and Facebook. But if you're really honest with yourself and think about it, your goal is probably more than simply the eyeballs. And so when you think about it, there are some limitations to that strategy. Maybe you don't want to simply give away all your audience's data to those particular social media platforms. Maybe you want to serve them yourself. And that's why we're seeing the emergence of many OTT media platforms. Previously, you would watch content through the major media outlets, ABC, NBC, BBC, now Facebook and YouTube. And now the content makers are going, quote unquote, over the top to reach their markets directly. Think about Disney Plus, Discovery Plus, and the multitude of other niche brand video channels who are engaging their core audience directly. Getting to know who your core audience is, your super fans, your radical core, and engaging them around topics that are relevant to their life may be a more efficient and effective way to energize your people, who will then leave the event and immediately sell the vision to 10 more of their friends and therefore grow your superfan radical core. Now, choosing the right type of event is important. There are different types of people, there are different types of objectives, there are different types of events. It's important to understand the difference between meetings. In some meetings, you need to achieve deep collaboration between attendees, while other gatherings are about gathering as many people as you can to mobilize them behind a specific vision. Sometimes you need an intimate fundraising banquet, and other times it's a rock concert that you're after. There's no right type of event which is better than another, but it is important to recognize what you're trying to achieve and choose the right medium to communicate exactly what you need to. Now, there generally is a right type of event for what your present needs are, and you shouldn't spend a whole bunch of time and money and then later on realize that you've made a poor choice to achieve the desired goals. And so that is why I want to encourage you to be intentional in figuring out the right medium. The rationale and motivation for an online event is just as important as the rationale and motivation for an in-person physical event. There's not one type of online event that you have to go down. It's often possible to mimic the aspects of a physical in-person event when you're having an online equivalency. However, it's important to recognize the differences between online and in-person events. Simply being online means you are communicating in another medium, and while this offers many benefits over in-person events, there are similarly many elements that cannot and shouldn't be reproduced. Online communication is better for intense, effective, focused, interactive information sharing, as well as focused networking, one-on-one meetings. While physical events can be much better for creating space and time, more serendipitous networking, having meals, coffees, and walks. Similarly, you will never experience the intense, ear-bleeding, emotionally high experience of being in a mosh pit at a concert online. However, you can experience a perhaps more intimate, artistic experience through a broadcast feed. It's also important that you think in a correct manner about your financial budget. It is so possible for you to lose a significant amount of money in organizing a large-scale event. However, it is important also for you to consider the financial aspects in the right way. As with many endeavors in life, it's also important not to underestimate the potential financial benefits and use false economy in planning your event. Many of the components of a successful event will involve spending, and this includes your stage lineup, your production budget, or broadcast distribution budget. Often your event will only be as strong as the weakest link. For example, you may decide to go big on funding a high-end speaker or band and then skimp on the production budget. In most scenarios, this would be a bad decision. And the same is true for online delivery of your event. There are some amazing solutions being offered on the market at the moment, and it's important that you don't skimp on providing an amazing experience for your audience. Now, we have advised many event coordinators who are hosting large events, and often the first component that is considered is the lineup of presenters on stage. Maybe it's famous bands and speakers who will have the ability to gather a crowd. Gifted and charismatic stage personalities are great, and they may form a component of your overall strategy. However, it's imperative that before you invite any presenters, you are clear about your metrics and your narrative. Now, the narrative is the story behind your event, the reason why your audience will want to attend your event rather than the other events where the same speakers and the bands will be attending. Discovering your narrative is typically a process which begins with discovering your why in hosting the event and the why your attendees have for attending. Now, following tried and trusted methods of storytelling and communicating your narrative is helpful for both in-person and for online events. Thinking of your potential attendees as the hero of the story that you are inviting them into, and with you as the trusted guide, is ultimately helpful to all parties and the vision which you would like to invite the attendees into. It may be that you're giving your audience a unique experience and opportunity to get involved in the most life-changing movement. And if that is true, you need to recognize and find ways to communicate that vision that involves your audience. This narrative must be communicated through your event brand guide and your written and video communication as you promote your event. Now, while this is true of all events, it is helpful not to miss this element when it comes to planning your online event, and consider the unique online methods to respond to this narrative. Determining your stage lineup. Who can communicate your goals most effectively in spoken, written, or musical form? Often the impetus, even the existence of an event, comes from the lineup of speakers, subject matter experts, influencers, and musical artists. While this may be the main hook to gather a big audience, the simple ability to gather an attractional stage lineup should not determine your event. The why and the narrative should always come first. Individuals or groups who present or perform from your stage need to serve that particular vision and narrative. And if this doesn't happen, there is a possibility that you, your audience, and your guest speaker will come away from this event feeling used, and this lack of cohesion almost never achieves the worthwhile purposes for which you started out. Now, when considering either a hybrid or a completely online event, it's important to consider the different mediums of communication you're employing. A stage in front of 50,000 people in an arena versus small screens in front of 1 million people are two entirely different mediums. Although the latter is reaching a much bigger audience, a small screen is always a much more intimate medium and requires an approach where the audience is being addressed in a more direct, one-on-one manner, much like I'm doing now. When considering your lineup, also consider how you're going to communicate to both audiences most effectively, and consider how your lineup is going to do this. Audience engagement is important in both mediums of communication. Now, it's clear to all of us that the world was taken by surprise by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the one question that we've received more than any others throughout this time is predicated on the longing to return to in-person events, but then people say how things will change in a post-COVID world with regard to online events. And our response has long been that we also long for the return to in-person events that we're seeing now. However, online events are not going away. Even before COVID, the online component of events was increasingly in demand, and the complexity was also increasing. So this is an area you shouldn't ignore for too much longer. So that's pretty much all there is for this section. So let's go through our checklist. So, you figured out the reasons why you're doing your event. The next thing you need to figure out is how to communicate what you're doing to your intended audience to ensure the right people are at your event. Although this is a little bit of a simplistic take, the human dynamics of any event remain pretty consistent, whether you're a nervous high schooler wanting to pull off the student event of the century, or gathering 80,000 into a football stadium, or hosting an online event of any size. It really is true if you get that school quarterback and cheerleader and their buddies, people start paying attention no matter what demographic you're trying to reach. The quarterback may be different for different audiences, and you may have to be ready to communicate these nuances in language that your particular audience understands and connects with. But outside of these communication differences, other dynamics are actually often the same. The bottom line is that getting people to an event typically revolves around a number of rather similar factors. So let's consider the reasons why people register, buy tickets, and eventually attend an event. And these things are things that you need to consider in your networking and marketing as you prepare for your event. Number one, people will come to see a VIP, a favorite musical act, an influencer, a subject matter expert. That stage lineup is important. Number 2, people come to learn. They're going to be equipped at your event. Number 3, often people will register to create memories and experience a unique moment of high emotion. That might be a rock band. Number 4, for the networking opportunities, often at expo events. Number 5, to support a cause. Number 6, to be at the event of your tribe, your affinity group, the annual get-together. Number 7, because friends and colleagues are going to the event and people want to be there and belong to the group. Number 8, people go to be inspired and get a kickstart, a kick up the backside in a particular area. And number 9, people go to be entertained. Often the reasons why people eventually attend are a combination of a number of these factors, and even more mundane reasons can just nudge a person over that finish line into actually buying a ticket. Now, we've talked about marketing, and it may start with emotion, narrative, and vision, and these are all great things, but the mechanics of getting the right amount of people to your event are just that. Mechanics. And after a number of events, you will typically be able to estimate the percentage of people who will show up when comparing that to the number of people who have registered. So if you have a free event, it might be, we typically get 50 to 60 people, 60% of people who register who actually attend. Or if you have a paid event, it might be 85 to 95% of people. Also, the same dynamics of giving attendees a nudge to register with tools like giving a price break for early bird purchases, maybe a coupon code or an opportunity to be part of an exclusive component of the event, like a VIP group. They're seemingly mundane, but they can be surprisingly effective. Therefore, it's important to employ a number of marketing strategies when inviting your potential audience. Communicating both the high-level narrative that we've talked about, as well as these more mundane tool nudges on timing, cost, and exclusivity, which can get people over the edge, and so you know the number of people who are going to attend your event. The next question is, who do you want attending your event? As we've previously mentioned, it's important to narrow in on the goals of the event that dictate who should attend. The value of success isn't always determined by the number of people registering. The question is, do you want the people who are attending to maybe complete a particular action after the event? Do you want to inspire a certain demographic to do something as a result of the event? Answering this who question will dictate your marketing strategy and the critical criteria of success moving forward. Next, why attendees buy your tickets. Knowing that it is typical for a person to buy a ticket due to several factors, which we've mentioned, it's important that you are aware of the channels it will take to communicate those reasons to a particular audience so that they can hear your message and then register. These vary per organization, and therefore it's important for you to think about your own unique situation. But these typically include things like word of mouth. Personal recommendations in any industry, in any vertical, is typically the best way for people to join up. But we can combine with that other things, exclusive invitations, incentivizing a certain group to sign up. Maybe it's an influencer recommendation. It's not just a friend, but it's somebody who the particular demographic really recognizes and admires, who recommends people sign up is always helpful, and typically one of your best forms of marketing. Because one of the main reasons that many attend an event is because other people they know are attending, it's critical to get the mavens in a particular social group to sign up, those people who are early adopters. Number 2 channel, social media marketing. This has become such a pervasive way of communicating to today's generation. Providing value through social media channels is always a good precursor to then inviting the audience through normal posts or through paid advertising. And then number 3, Your traditional advertising channels of TV, radio, print, pay-per-click, banner advertising can still be effective to reinforce your message. And getting all three of these channels to come together is often the way to get people across that finish line. It's also important to distinguish between the reasons people will buy a ticket or register for your event and the reason they will remember it. Your brand values and the reason they feel connected to your tribe, which will result in word-of-mouth recommendations and repeat visits. The brand value is built through the value that you deliver at the event, which could be as little as providing value through a networking platform. But real loyalty comes when you can actually create unique and memorable experiences. And this leads us into the building of the event. So that's pretty much all there is for this section, but let's go through our checklist. So we've thought about the why of your event. We've thought about who your main audience is and how you will communicate to them about attending. Now we need to get into the meat of planning your event. And the first part now is determining when the event should take place and how long it should last. Now, event producers who are familiar with the cadence of an in-person physical event are often curious and ask us whether there are similar optimal times and durations for online events. There's no exact science in answering this question. However, there are some guiding principles which must be considered. In-person events will often require an attendee to take time out from their usual schedule. It might include travel and booking accommodation, and if this is the case for a significant portion of your audience, then it's often wise to make the hassle involved in travel and staying away from home worth it. You, as the event producer, must be concerned with the creation of space in the event, time for networking and meeting, as well as determining the potential for curated moments in plenary sessions which unite the messaging and can mobilize your entire audience. Now, hybrid events, online and in person, typically have the same considerations as in-person events, as it mirrors the in-person event experience. Now, it often comes as a surprise to first-time hybrid event producers that the people attending the online portion of the event are actually physically present at the event. They may have other commitments, or they may be in a hotel room, and they don't want to miss out on certain parts of the event. It may be that they missed a plenary session because of an offline meeting, and they are catching up with the flow of the event. The bottom line with hybrid events is that you should simply mirror the in-person schedule. Exclusively online events may be treated slightly differently. Since they don't require attendees to take time off work, one more significant consideration is that attendees may only be joining outside of work hours, unless, of course, you're hosting a work event, in which case holding it within typical working hours becomes optimal. Many in-person expo-type events have very little main stage time and spread the event over a number of days so that attendees can network, have offline business meetings, grab a coffee or lunch together. These same components are not all present with online events. The event isn't constrained by a physical place, and therefore the times when aspects of the event happen will differ. It's important that you give thoughts to when your main plenaries in a virtual event happen for this very reason. If you typically have longer, more drawn-out plenaries, you may think about condensing your main program slightly time-wise. I might add that it's important not to swing the pendulum too far In the other direction, it's not unusual for our project managers to advise clients on the need to actually include breaks in their schedule when they have multiple back-to-back 1-hour sessions. In addition, while you can't grab lunch with someone online, there are still numerous networking tools that should be factored in your event. Maybe give thought to how your event can be more than a simple one-way broadcast. The question remains, when should you schedule certain components within maybe a multi-day event? Now, there are no hard and fast rules. You know your audience, and we can have constructive conversation about that. But we typically see a few general rules that are different than in person. We often see spikes at the beginning of an online event in a much greater way than we would in an in-person where people may arrive late. And then, as with in-person event, we will see spikes when top bill presenters, music acts, or VIPs are on stage. And so hopefully that's helpful as you start planning and thinking about the timing and the duration of your event. So that's pretty much all there is for this section. So let's go through our checklist. Whether you're having an entirely in-person, a hybrid, or an exclusively virtual event, there are a number of questions that you need to answer. One of the first questions is related to venue and production. Often this seems to be answered more easily for in-person than online events. It's natural that if you're having an event for, say, 15 people, you may choose to have it in a boardroom and ensure there are enough snacks and refreshments in the room for the duration of the meeting. And then if you're having a 15,000 person event, you're going to rent an arena with adequate audio-visual production so that the audience doesn't have any challenges with seeing or hearing what is going on. Now, similar principles are true for online events, and yet sometimes the production elements for online events are not thought through thoroughly. WebRTC, that's Web Real-Time Conversations, and other video conferencing applications that you'll be aware of are amazing tools for real-time interactions. However, their strength is in connecting individuals through low-latency video connections. And that's usually for small numbers of people and not for broadcasting a high-quality message to thousands. Now, if you're having a 15-person boardroom meeting and you wish to take it online, then utilizing such WebRTC, Zoom-type applications is the right choice. If you're broadcasting a message to thousands, however, using a low-latency application is probably not the right choice. Now, the first answer to this question is production value. If an individual is invited to present a TED Talk type presentation, there will often be nerves involved. The individual has to get the presentation just right. There are numerous books on the market of how a person can do this effectively. In addition to the person's presentation and how they look on the day, the presentation is typically given on a thought-out, clutter-free stage with high-quality cameras placed perfectly, lights, audio, visual, which mean that the only thing that is focused upon is the message itself. Everything is just right to present that message. Video conferencing lends itself to convenience, extemporaneous communication, and ultimately disposable content, which is often not the right feel you want to go for when you're going for a high-quality presentation. While a presenter can prepare their content in a similar manner to a TED Talk, presenting it through a webcam In a home with poor lighting, poor audio, and distracting background, with a high risk for video dropout and audio sync issues and typically no tech help, it's not often the most ideal solution. It must be noted that there are definitely ways to improve the production quality of video conferencing conversations. Recording on a higher quality camera with better lighting, audio. However, these things can often be logistically challenging, especially if you're dealing with a presenter half a country away that is slightly tech challenged. Number 2, the buffering issue. Now, personal experience and larger analytic studies reveal that audiences hate buffering. Frame drops, other glitching in video, low latency video technologies currently make the risk of such occurrences happening much, much greater. And the risk is only increased with a larger audience. To avoid issues like this, when presenting to larger audiences, we suggest that you utilize a professional encoding solution for such live situations. Now, thinking about what you want to communicate and how that will be communicated needs to be a holistic process, whether you're planning in person or online. What is the content? How is it presented via video? i.e., what is the production quality? And what platform you are using to present it are all relevant questions to answer. Sardius, we have a high-quality interactive platform. However, if the production quality and the content of the video is not very good, then the overall experience will not be a compelling one. So that's pretty much all there is for this section, but let's go through our checklist. In this session, we're going to be talking about a subject that may seem very administrative, and that's registration. In actual fact, the conversation you have around this very issue actually determines a whole lot about your event and your attendees' experience. So let's jump in. Determining whether your event should have a registration wall is one of the first practical considerations in building your event, as this will be the first thing that is built. It may be true that you can attract a bigger audience on social platforms such as Facebook or YouTube in a short period of time for relatively little cost, but the challenge with this approach is that it's Facebook and YouTube that are the ones who reap the benefits of knowing and serving your audience rather than you. The future of all media delivery is undoubtedly increased customization for the viewer. And the real question you need to be asking right now is whether you want social media platforms to be the one getting to know and serve your audience, or whether you want to be the ones doing that. Registration walls, whether they are paid or free, undoubtedly place a barrier of entry in front of any audience, and a barrier that undoubtedly reduces the amount of attendees. But on the flip side, it also significantly increases the attendees' commitment to your event and to your cause. It communicates a level of exclusivity which is often desirable, and it can significantly cover the costs of your event. Social media strategy should certainly be a component of your overall marketing strategy. However, limiting your content delivery to a single platform decreases your ability to know and to serve your audience effectively. One of the key strategies that we advise at Sardius is to host your event to your own URL and thereby increase awareness of your website and your online community. Sardius will typically host your event at a subdomain of your URL. For example, we often put like a subdomain watch.yourhomepage.com. This integrates with your online home and cements this location as a place for you to serve and interact with your audience effectively. We often advise you to use your social media channels not only to engage your audience with your message and market the event, but also to add value through broadcasting introductory or maybe free public-facing plenary or breakout sessions, which ultimately then point back to your event URL address. And maybe we say clip out certain highlights throughout the event and throw it onto your social media channels. If you don't have an extensive social media presence, it might be advisable to utilize some channels of friends, maybe sponsors or other friends that do have a significant online social media presence. And in that way, you can syndicate valuable content, which can ultimately grow your audience. Now, once you've determined that you wish to create a registered event, another key component to this decision is whether the event will include a paywall or not, and also what type of information you need to collect during this registration process. So we'll go through a few of those type of events. Let's look firstly at the free event registration. Now, that might be as simple as collecting the email addresses and names of your attendees. And some clients even provide the main sessions of the broadcast completely for free with no registration at all, but then offer many of the features of interactivity, the breakouts, maybe the post-event video on demand as perks, which come if you do that free registration. Such a free registration may be worth it to you in order for you to build your CRM database. Keep in mind that it's often advisable to actually connect the registration information collected here to your day-to-day source of truth client's database so that you can make the most of the data. And also to understand how your audience has interacted with your event through the analytics, which we will address later. Once we've determined to do a registration, one of the next key questions is, should I charge for my event? Now, a paywall doesn't always mean that you have to sell tickets. An alternate option could be a voluntary suggested donation for the event, especially in the case of nonprofits, which technically for us works in much the same way as a ticket sale. Many event organizers will not actually cover the cost of the event simply through ticket sales, but with revenue from other sources coming from sponsors, donations, and other ancillary revenue channels during the event. Every event is different. For one portion of high demand, high ticket price events, paying the event bill is never a challenge. But for another portion of event producers, breaking even may be a very high priority for you. Now, as you would expect, the normal rule of supply and demand applied to your ticket sales. Now, more information at registration and higher ticket prices will typically lead to fewer people making a commitment and going through with a purchase. Another consideration that is often relevant for nonprofit events is that when you sell tickets, there is a requisite expectation created related to your event of a certain level of quality in the deliverables, which often includes a high-touch customer service necessity. And therefore, such organizations may choose the route of a suggested donation for a ticket instead. Now, there isn't a right or wrong approach in answering these questions. However, you should consider them alongside your main event metrics as you build your registration. The next section we're going to look at is gathering the right information for you. With any type of ticketing, you will need to determine the fields of information you wish to collect. These may include information necessary for registration and the smooth running of your event, information necessary to create a user profile in the event, and any other marketing information that is helpful for you. I'm just going to run through a list of examples of fields that you may consider, and we'll bring it up on the graphic. Name, your first and last name, email address, a full physical address, a partial physical address, country, state, postal code, telephone number, maybe social media links, a short bio, a profile picture of the attendee, a type of ticket required. You may want to suggest different types of audience journeys throughout the event. You may want to have a field for promotional codes, credit card information, and custom marketing questions and opt-ins. As we look at these fields, one of the questions that comes up, should I be concerned about privacy issues in collecting this data? As more and more companies have profited from using the personally identifiable information, PII, of their constituents, privacy concerns have become an increasing concern for any online endeavor. Now, in many countries around the world, legal frameworks have been created to protect citizens from the unscrupulous practices of certain online companies. Now, even if privacy concerns are something that you have never considered before, it's important, if you have an online presence and you collect any kind of personally identifiable information, that you give it a little bit of thought. If you have a web or an app presence, now would be a good time to develop your own privacy policy, terms of service, and perhaps a cookie policy to communicate that you are not one of those unscrupulous organizations who are going to sell data to the highest bidder. As you build the registration of your event, it's important to display these policies to your audience to communicate how you are using the audience's information. We typically find that displaying these opt-ins at the point of registration is the right place to communicate these policies. Related to these privacy issues is obviously GDPR, CCPA, and other legal requirements around the world. Now, if you have a significant audience in Europe, UK, or in California, it's important that your online event is compliant with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, EU and UK, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, respectively. You are responsible as the data controller of your constituents' information. And in a subsidiary manner, Sodius Media is responsible as a data processor for your constituents. Other jurisdictions around the world have similar provisions to GDPR and CCPA, and Sodius tries to keep up to date with many of these. But we've placed an emphasis on compliance with both GDPR and CCPA, as these, up to this point, have been the gold standard in relationship to privacy compliance. Sodius will provide you with all the relative documentation regarding how we use the information to aid in the smooth running of an online event, and will require you to give permission so that we can process your data. The next question in building your registration is, should I limit the number of devices per registration? Privacy issues are nothing to be afraid of. While you shouldn't be using the personal identifiable information for purposes for which you're not authorized, obtaining the consent of attendees to opt into your calls to action is often exactly what both you and the attendee want. Business models moving forward will increasingly rely upon the organization's ability to customize their services and communications to their clients. I find it both reassuring and convenient to walk into a local coffee shop where they know your name and they've already prepared your coffee. One barrier to collecting this information, however, is when individuals share their username and passwords. And this has been a problem that Netflix and many of the other online video platforms have to deal with. When Barry from accounting tweets out his access codes and suddenly 1,500 people are using it, you have a lot of useless information about Barry. Added to the fact that you may have missed out on selling many tickets and a lot of money. For these reasons, we recommend that you limit the amount of devices per registration. When an individual buys a ticket or registers to a Sodius-powered event, a unique token is created per registration, and that is used to create the individual event journeys throughout the event. It's also possible to restrict the amount of devices that can access the event on that token. As you build the registration, it's important to consider your goals and whether you wish to restrict each token to a specific number of devices, whether it's 1 device, 10 devices, 20 devices. Audience journeys. You may choose to develop an event where every attendee is served the same content the same way. Alternately, you may wish to create an event where the audience either chooses or is placed in a custom journey related to their audience segment. In much the same way as you have choices in an in-person event, you need those same choices online. Now, this may change what content that audience segment sees, which user interface they interact with, and which other attendees they interact with as well. You may build an event where attendees get to choose what components of the event they wish to participate in and when they want to participate in it after they've entered the event, or these choices may be made by the audience during that registration process. I'm going to run through a few examples of choices that the audience can make either before registration or after registration. The first one is audience segment. Do you have a leaders track and a youth segment and a VIP segment that needs to be served different experiences, different content than the general audience? This might be determined by a ticket type in the registration process. Secondly, breakouts. Do you have multiple breakout sessions in your event, some of which should be attended by different affinity groups? Again, it is possible for individuals to opt in to this right journey for them in the registration process and therefore make an indication of which breakout they will attend at that point. Chat watch parties. In larger events, it's not advisable to have the entire audience in one chat window. Obviously, depending on how interactive the audience is. As a rule of thumb, I always say if you have an audience over 1,000, you may consider breaking your audience into watch parties by maybe geographic region or affinity group. Selecting skilled and appropriate moderators in your watch parties can add a significant value to your event. Moderators might be subject matter experts, maybe regional representatives, or maybe in a church it might be a group pastor or a cell group leader. It's also sometimes advisable to include the actual presenter in the watch party if the video being played is actually played simulated live. And so you add that live component to the event, and so people can ask questions on the fly. One-on-one meetings is another component. Part of any event are exclusive experiences. Meeting one-on-one with subject matter experts, consultants, counselors, or for personal prayer is one such exclusive experience. While this might be decided later on in the event, it's also possible to schedule this experience through the registration process and make this part of the individualized journey for the attendee. Building your online registration. For online events, registering for the event with your organization may be the first point of contact that an attendee has with you. Therefore, there are a number of elements to think through in addition to the fields of information that you're collecting. And these ultimately relate to assets that our project managers and event managers typically ask you to provide us with. Firstly, the design of the ticketing. You need to be thinking about including your event branding in the ticket. Secondly, confirmation message once registered. This is the page that appears immediately after registration to indicate success in registration. We have some stock confirmation pages, but advise you to customize this message as it's from you to the attendee. The registration confirmation email content, this is very similar to the confirmation message we just talked about. Now, we have some examples of what good confirmation emails look like, but again, this is a message from you, so it's important to ensure you get the message and the tone correct from your organization. Lastly, the pre-event landing page. Once an individual has registered, they won't experience the full event until the day that it begins. However, it is still possible to move the objectives of the event forward with an effective pre-event landing site. This is the location where registrants will be directed to upon completing registration. It includes your basic branding elements with a written welcome message and usually a countdown to when the event will open. We also advise that in addition to any text, you include a welcome video, which can help orient your audience regarding what to expect at the event, as well as creating excitement and maybe pointing people to a specific call to action that you may have in that pre-event build-up period. This might be a temporary landing page until the event watch page is created. Now let's talk about collecting money for a moment. A number of ticketing services out there handle the payment processing of an event for a significant fee, which is often taken off the top of the monies collected before the remainder then reaches you. Now we at Sardius operate on a different model, and that's a bring your own Stripe account approach. This means that you will pay the percentage transaction fee, maybe that 2 to 3%, and then receive the income directly from your audience to your bank account. The next question is, when should I open registration? Now, some organizations have established behaviors concerning when they open registration for their events, and it would create confusion to their audience if they veered from this course. However, when no such general behavior has been established, a common question that is often asked is when registration should be opened. Now, while many aspects of a physical event and an online event are transferable, this is one area that must have a few different considerations. An in-person event will often require the audience to take time off work, or at least their day-to-day schedule, if it's an internal organizational event. This often requires much more forward planning, including travel, accommodation arrangements. For this reason, it's often important to open event ticketing up to a year or more in advance for an in-person event. Added to this is the fact that an in-person event often has limited capacity at every level of the event, which could add the motivation to buy early. Now, an online event does not invade as much of the day-to-day schedule of an audience, a fact that must be considered when creating the event schedule if it's entirely online. And therefore, opening up the registration closer to the event and building a clear communication plan from the start of the registration to the end of the event and beyond is something that should be considered. For hybrid events, you may even consider opening up the online portion of the registration later than the in-person portion. While you can still utilize early bird pricing in online events have no real space limitations for the size of an audience. While you can utilize early bird pricing in online events really have no space limitations for the size of the audience. This doesn't mean that an event should have an unlimited registration. Unique limited experiences based on human limitations of breakout watch parties or VIP one-on-one consultations may create that exclusivity that is often a big selling point for an in-person event. So that's pretty much all there is for this section. So let's go through our checklist. In this session, we're going to go through all the considerations that you need to think about in relationship to producing your online event. When you design a large in-person event, much thought is often given not only to the content that is delivered from the stage in the main plenaries, but also to the design of the stage and the main auditorium. Also critical is the decor, flow, and hospitality from registration through the main sessions, the breakout seminars, the layout and the movement flow of attendees moving from main session to the exhibition hall, let's say, and finally, the time and the spacing between sessions. All of this process, along with thousands of other considerations unique to your organization, takes time and consideration. The bottom line is the way that the event is designed communicates to attendees their value and the value of the experience. Design gives us the opportunity and the ability to create the correct emotion and feeling needed to highlight the importance of the content that is being communicated in your event. Now, similar motivations must guide the approach to designing an online event. An amazing brand contained with killer design, implemented with a highly intuitive user experience, will create the difference between a good and a great event. Creating this wow factor, as we like to call it, is something that will create that difference. Your audience is typically part of your tribe. They've come to your URL to experience your event. Now, while your audience could experience your broadcast within the context of a social media platform or even a cookie-cutter platform, in such scenarios, often the platform itself becomes a dominant part of the experience. You are in essence meeting in, say, Facebook's building rather than your own. Now, those of the utilitarian mindset may not care for this design aspect, yet I believe, and all of us at the Sardius team believe, that it's important to think about the following components in a similar way to the way that you would consider the component parts of an in-person event. Considering the video, the user interface, which we call the UI, which is typically more about the design aspect, the user experience, or UX, which is typically more about the functionality of the platform, as well as the timing of the overall presentation that altogether determines the quality and the wow factor of your event. Now, Sardius can adopt a number of approaches when it comes to design and UI and the whole graphic design process. The first approach that we take is that we do everything. Sardius always provides the user experience functionality related to how the event works, and we can also offer professional design services, which can be limited to simply the user interface of the main watch experience, but could also be extended to creating a unique brand guide with logos, graphical assets, motion graphic assets to avoid the workload for many busy design departments, or create a unique interface for smaller organizations that may or may not have a design department. Approach 2 is that you rely for graphic design on your tried and tested in-house designers or design agency. We are very intimately aware of the visceral effect of design and how much brand and design matter to design teams and agencies of so many of the larger organizations that we work with. Outsourcing design to a new company for what may be a large communication opportunity for your organization may not be the road that you want to travel at this particular time. And that's perfectly fine. In such situations, Sardius provides your design team with the different wireframe templates and options and previous examples of event layouts and user experiences that have been successful in our experience, and invite your design team to dream about what your brand would look like in the most optimal situation, often creating a flat design that then our team brings to life. The third approach is a more modular approach for perhaps more budget-minded clients. For those more conscious of time and budget, there are also more modular approaches that we can offer in this situation, giving you dimensions of some of the design elements that are needed to be populated for an event. In this case, it will still feel like you customized, as you will be responsible for colors, images, and design elements. However, it is a stripped down approach. A list of design elements that you need to provide will be given to you by your event manager. Regardless of how the user interface is created, there are many design type elements that you will need to provide to our project management team that will be used to build the event out, and your event manager will provide you with that list. coupled with an excellently designed user interface, which effectively communicates your brand, is the schedule and structure of the event, and considerations of when to present certain components of the event. Now, we take the approach that an effective online event is not a static web page with a library of video and other information that the attendee gets to navigate through on their own time, although there is a time and a place for this type of experience, and a component of it may even be part of your live event, but rather an effective online event in much the same way as an in-person event is a shared experience of different event sessions that are served to the attendees in real time in much the same way that an in-person event happens. Most events consist of main plenary sessions, breakout seminar tracks, and other type meetings. These sessions form the backbone of the event in terms of content delivery. Therefore, it's important to consider a number of factors in delivering the most optimal experience for your attendees. The run sheet or stage and content order. Before considering anything technical, one of the most important tasks you as the event producer will have to undertake is developing your event run sheet. This will require you to think through your overall event purpose and metrics, what you're trying to achieve in different parts of the event, and how do you want to structure the communications and the content flow of the event to achieve those goals. Now, traditional in-person entertainment will often build towards the best entertainer who is topping the bill, which typically happens last or close to the end of the event. While you might consider this, it may also be helpful to think of your entire event in the same way that you would consider a single presentation. Create a story arc that ultimately underlines your calls to action more effectively or helps you train your audience in sequence. One of the main benefits of online events is the ability to include presenters from around the world in a way that would not be possible if they had to travel to your event at an in-person location. There are a number of effective softwares and simple templates available to help you manage your minute-by-minute run sheet for the event. Just be aware that despite all of your careful planning, many, maybe most, run sheets won't go exactly as planned, especially if you're broadcasting significant portions of your event live. Broadcasting your event live has many exciting and important psychological benefits, of which I love, but predictability isn't one of those benefits. It's important to plan for the unexpected in your run sheet. Allowing for the unpredictable in your online schedule is something that you should be aware of. Sardius gives you the ability to create very complex event schedules ahead of time, which you will need to do. However, if you have the unexpected changes to your schedule at the last minute, you need to ensure that you are hosting your event on a platform that allows you to make last-minute changes, rather than the event being significantly cached on the attendee's machine. Sardius allows you to make those last-minute changes and work them seamlessly into the flow of your event. Now let's turn to the video production of the event. Typically for an in-person and a hybrid event, it's recognized that video production must be of a certain quality level. The same realization is not always recognized with exclusively online events. With the proliferation of video conferencing platforms, video quality often isn't given as much thought until the audience is struggling trying to follow a presenter who has filmed his presentation on his mobile phone with bad video and audio. And when we speak of video production quality, we're speaking of video camera quality, audio quality, lighting quality, background quality, and finally, broadcasting quality. Often with online events, the event producer is having to deal with presenters from diverse geographical locations. In the past, may have only been the preserve of outside broadcasts on newscasts of election coverage, without having to produce full-on TV quality Here are a few suggestions to produce the best quality video for your event and mitigate against some of the inherent risks. Number 1, obtain a central location to film and broadcast from. Most individuals don't have access to high-quality video production gear. Now, this has changed somewhat in the post-COVID world, and even if you do, it is often wise to have a second set of eyes as a video producer to ensure quality production. If you obtain a central location to shoot the event with a higher quality production level, better equipment and tech personnel, and invite your key presenters to this location, you can limit your exposure to bad video. Secondly, pre-record the segments of your event where you're broadcasting a video conversation. There may be legitimate reasons why you need to broadcast a low latency video connection live. For example, if you require a live feedback interaction with the audience. If you don't, it may be wise to pre-record this segment, which gives you the ability to get better quality video, which could possibly be edited if there are any mistakes or video dropouts. Thirdly, ensure key presenters have better quality video recording and broadcasting equipment. The success of your events may be dependent upon certain key presenters. If they cannot be at the central location, then try and ensure that they have access to better quality video production. This might involve them traveling to a studio close to them, or it may involve providing them with better cameras, lighting, audio, perhaps a backdrop that they can record their presentation independently. Even if it is part of a live video conference conversation, this can be edited for a later simulated live broadcast. Now let's talk about broadcasting and the live or the simulated live question. The subject of whether your event should be broadcast live or pre-recorded and broadcast at a simulated live event is highly connected to the structure of your event. Having bad video can be a make or break for an online event. Therefore, this is a consistent question that the Sardius team discusses with our clients. There are a number of pros and cons to each approach. Let's talk about live. But it is these very limitations that make live events popular. It creates a psychological buzz, it results in bigger audiences, and it creates the ability to create finances through mechanisms like pay-per-view. You only have to look at the audiences for live sporting events to realize that there is a massive benefit in watching live versus the simulated live broadcast several hours later. Now, even outside of the sporting realm, live broadcasts have a certain cachet that results in bigger audiences, and despite the inherent risks involved, which we'll talk about, they give you some opportunities that are not available with simulated live or video on demand. These largely boil down to live audience engagement. And this includes interaction with questions from the audience who are posting in chat or via video conferencing, the ability to poll or to ask your audience questions and get in-the-moment responses. The risks connected to live broadcasting are related to two main factors. The first of these is the unpredictable and complex nature of an event schedule, which can mean a much bigger production budget to ensure that there are no errors in the broadcast. Secondly, the reliability of your broadcast setup, which may include all your video conferencing connections, but it's mainly related to your video streaming encoding solution and your internet connection. While Sardius can and does work with many encoding solutions, there are a few that we recommend depending on the nature of your event. These include Resi, Haivision, Telestream, and a few more that we can talk about. If you're unfamiliar with the world of web streaming, it may be advisable for Sardius to handle the streaming portion of your event. For one-off events, we will typically use Resi as our live streaming partner due to the resilience of their streaming protocol in many event situations. One of the most frustrating possibilities in a live streamed event is the audience having to deal with buffering issues. Mitigating the possibility of buffering is something we advise repeatedly and believe one of the best ways to do this is by using HLS streaming. Simulated live. Despite the cachet that's involved in live streaming, this may not be the right way for you to go for a number of reasons. Live broadcasts, if done well, can often cost more in terms of video production and streaming and can cause you a lot of stress due to the inherent risks involved. Some thrive on this risk, others don't. Another approach can be to pre-record your program and then broadcast it as if it's live. This is often called a simulated or sim live broadcast. If you are not interacting live with your audience and there is no difference between what your live broadcast would look like and a broadcast that is pre-recorded, there are a number of benefits. Added to the reduced risk and potentially reduced cost, it also gives you an opportunity to broadcast at times that are convenient for your audience across different times of the day and even different time zones. Simulated live broadcasts also give your presenters an ability to interact in real time with the audience within the chat window, which can actually make an extremely compelling experience. They are presenting by video, but they are responding in real time in chat. Let's talk about copyrights for a moment. It's important in building your event that you have the correct permissions to broadcast the content your schedule dictates to your audience for the duration of the time that you wish to broadcast. This means it's important, if you intend to live broadcast and keep the archive of the session afterwards, that you have the correct permissions of the on-camera individuals. If you're broadcasting music, it's important that you obtain the correct performance and broadcast permissions ahead of time. If you need help navigating this, you can talk with your Saudi's event manager who can point you in the right direction. Let's talk about user interface features for a moment. Every organization has internal language, behaviors, assumptions, and personalities. Operating within an organization for an extended period can blind you to such internalized communication. Yet this can be confusing to visitors and new attendees to your event. There are simple methods of presenting information that can provide clarity and context to your event and which can orient your audience to help them quickly understand what is going on and ultimately help them understand you. These components include bios. Who is presenting now? Why should I listen to them? How can I connect with them through social links and other web calls to action? And how does their inclusion in the event add to the overall purpose of the event? Saudi's typically recommends you include headshots, bios, and links to your presenters. And we can provide the total list of presenters or pop-out modals, which will change throughout the event as your presenters on stage change. Secondly, the schedule. Providing a clear schedule for the event is a must. We typically do this two ways, with an at-a-glance approach as well as providing an interactive timeline under the main video player, which progresses throughout the event and gives the ability for the audience to see where they are at within the context of the whole event. Calls to action, or CTAs, are highly related to your main purpose and the metrics of success for your event. These should generally be decided ahead of time. You shouldn't overload your audience with CTAs, but they are super helpful in being clear with your audience about what you would like them to do, so don't leave them out. And once they're determined, you can include them in many parts of the event and the event platform, from presentations in the main session, to linked overlays, to handouts, to things in the chat window. However, within the main watch experience, this might take the form of prominent text, graphics leading to a landing page, which can help your audience respond in an appropriate manner. So these are just some of the things that you need to think about as you create a clear, effective production of your online event. Let's go through the checklist. In this session, we want to take some time to discover how you can get your audience involved in the event. After all, this is one of the reasons to use a customized online platform. Providing customized communication opportunities throughout the event, both from you to the attendees, between the attendees, and from the attendees back to you, is highly desirable to keep audience engagement high and for everyone to achieve the objectives they have throughout the event. Sardius provides a number of options for these purposes. Firstly, moderated chat and watch parties. Providing your audience with the ability to chat as a group or as a smaller geographic or affinity-based watch parties has become an expected feature in recent years. We've already mentioned the pitfalls of having too many attendees in a chat window and the rationale for watch parties. However,